So today we have Bradley with us, the founder of the Talent Stacker Salesforce Career Development Program. Thank you, Bradley, so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I am happy to come chat with you guys.
So I'd like to start just understanding a little bit more about your background and how you got started with Salesforce.
Yeah, so Salesforce has been pretty much my life since college, especially as a career path and really from a lifestyle perspective. And I can talk a little bit more about that. But how I got started with Salesforce is out of college, I wanted to be an economics teacher, and it did not go well for me. I applied for probably about 100 jobs, anywhere within 2 to 3 hours of where I lived. I was willing to relocate at least a little bit. And I got 2 responses, and they both said, "Hey, no thanks," not even an interview or anything like that. And I had taken a lot of time. I had obviously gone to school for 4 years. I had gotten certified in every math from sixth grade through 12th grade because I knew the math was in demand. And there were, each school only has, one economics, maybe two economics teachers. So I knew I needed to sort of get myself more diversified from a teaching certification standpoint. And I did that, and I still got no traction. And the reason for that is because I didn't know how to showcase myself, and I didn't know how to tell people why I was valuable or why they should even care about me. And that was probably my downfall on going in that direction. And obviously it all worked out okay now. But I think looking back, I realize there's so much more that there is to learn about getting a job. It's not just about having the credentials or being capable of doing a great job. It's also helping the people who are hiring you to understand why you're capable of doing that job and why you're the right pick for that. And so that's why you'll find with a lot of the things I talk about, it has just as much to do with your technical ability and being capable of doing a job well as it does with your ability to actually communicate with people and be a real person and get in front of people and help them see you and know you. So after that, I get out of college and I have this rude awakening, and I just start applying for all the jobs I can find. And I trip and fall into this junior Salesforce administrator role. And I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what Salesforce was, but I knew that it paid okay. At the time, it was like 30 grand. This was like 10 years ago. It was like $30,000. And I was like, hey, look, it's a salary. I get a 401k and I get my healthcare taken care of, and I'm a grown up now, and this is awesome. And I took the job, and I had no idea what it was going to turn into for me. And I'll tell you that in the first 3 months, I wanted to quit because I was like, there's so much to learn. Like, this is so much new information. We didn't have Trailhead. I was, just trying to learn stuff off of knowledge articles online and poke through the admin setup and figure out what to do. There are actual books, like Salesforce for Dummy books, that you could get. And I would just read through those and try to figure it out. And it was overwhelming in the first 3 months. And I wanted to quit. And my wife was like, look, you have a salary and we have benefits, and you are not quitting. And I was like, all right, I'll stick it out. But from there, things have just really progressed. That was about 10, 11 years ago now. Since then, I would say after that 3-month hurdle, things really started feeling more comfortable and started clicking more. By the end of a year, I thought I knew everything. So I started applying for other jobs and quickly found out I did not know everything. And there's this whole Salesforce world out there of different industries and companies of different sizes, and just so much going on that there's no way I could ever know it all. And I think that was probably the most important process I went through, was thinking I knew everything and then making the realization that I'll never know everything, and that's okay. And so I did consulting. I moved from that internal role to a consulting role. I did that for about 4 years. And then when my daughter was born, I started my own consultancy so I could work part-time. And I did that for 6 years before starting Talent Stacker, and sort of shifting from, consulting 15 to 25 hours a week to helping other people realize the possibilities that Salesforce brings to the table. And that's what I noticed, just a lot of people struggling. People would get certified and they couldn't find jobs. People didn't know what Salesforce was. And, once they find out about it, they realize how amazing it is. And once I started seeing that happening, I realized there's a much bigger impact than just me going to work and doing my job that I could have, because I was just so fortunate to have the experience that I did.
Yeah, so like having those perspectives, like watching other people struggling with this field and your own personal struggles that you had at the beginning, is that what you think drove you towards creating Talent Stacker?
I think what really was that critical moment of I'm going to do something real with this was I went on a podcast, and many of you may or may not know this, but I went on a podcast called Choose FI, but this was back in 2018. And I had met Jonathan and Brad Barrett, Jonathan Mendonza and Brad Barrett, the co-hosts of Choose FI, at a finance meetup. We'd gone to a meetup, said hi, I did a little presentation on lifestyle design and, having a career that can allow you to enjoy your life before retirement, because they were all so focused on retirement. So I did a little presentation about how to enjoy your life before retirement by finding a career that could fit your lifestyle a little more cleanly and could allow you to focus on your values. So a few months later, they invited me to come on the show, and I was taken aback. I was like, wow, really? Like me? I get to talk on Choose FI. That's the craziest thing. And we had a great time. But what came out of that was the Salesforce for Everyone Facebook group. There was so much feedback, and a lot of people don't know this. That group used to be called Building Your Talent Stack with Salesforce back in 2018. That's what it was called. And no one would join because they didn't know what that meant. But we like this idea of talent stacking. And no one knew what that meant. So they were like, it seems like a weird Salesforce group. I don't think I'm going to join that one. And for the longest time, we had maybe 500 members or something like that. But what did happen was, out of the first 100 members who joined that group, I was able to help a lot of them one-on-one because it was small enough, and I could answer every question, every single post that went into the group. I could personally respond, and it was awesome. And sometimes people would want to hop on the call, and if I looked at them and I said, hey, they're really engaged, I see promise, they seem to understand what's going on here, they're putting in the work, let me hop on a call with them and help them. And very quickly we noticed that out of that group, we had about 40 people land jobs that year. And it was unbelievable. And the feeling of having someone reach out to you and say, I just doubled my income. I don't have to go commute into work an hour tomorrow because of that Facebook group and because of you helping me. And I finally changed the name of the group to Salesforce for Everyone. And overnight, I guess because of the SEO, we had, I think, another 700 people request to join over the weekend. So it doubled the size of the group, and it got out of hand really quickly. I remember being on a walk, and that's sort of my morning routine, but I'm on a walk, and I think, for the first time, I'm not going to be able to respond to every post. This has now gotten out of my personal control. And so I'm going to have to let go a little bit and come up with a smarter way to scalably help people, because I'm not going to be able to do it one-on-one anymore. So how can I do that scalably? And what do you know? Jonathan Mendonza basically messages me that same day. It was like an epiphany I had. He messages me same day. We don't talk to each other. And he just says, hey, Brad, I'd like to talk to you about what you're doing with the Salesforce stuff. I think there's more to this than just having a podcast episode. I said, okay, cool. I'd love to talk about it. We had an amazing 2-hour meeting, and we sat down for the next 3 months and probably worked about 80 hours a week. And we built everything from scratch together. And I interviewed every one of those 40 people who landed jobs. And I wanted to figure out, what is the pattern? What is it that helps you break into an entry level role? What are the parallels here that we can do? And is this scalable? And everything they did, it was almost like 70, 80%, their stories lined up. It was the same thing. It was the same advice. It was the same tips. And we said, okay, we can take this to the next level. And so we created Talent Stacker. And, I'll say, honestly, I didn't know if it was going to work well for the first couple of months when we started Talent Stacker, because it's a 6-month program. That's what we thought it was, a 6-month program. And so I needed 6 full months to see if this was going to work or not. And it worked far better than we ever expected. The community has grown in such a positive way. I never could have imagined, whether you're in the paid program or you're just hanging out in the Talent Stacker communities, it's just such an awesome place to be. And I just love being around all of that energy. There's some skeptical energy out there, but I think that's overcome by all of the positive energy. And it really is a beautiful thing. I couldn't have drawn it up.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely feel the positive energy with Talent Stacker and just Salesforce in general. There's just such a amazing supportive community around this.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me into my next question, because we do hear a lot of positivity around Salesforce, but as medical professionals, we know that there's
Mhm.
hardships with every single job that you do. So, is there any like specific hardships that you have encountered with your job working with Salesforce? Any ways that we could mitigate those? Any advice you could give to us?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think too, we sort of have lived in this era of like almost toxic positivity. And I think it's sort of coined as, where people are just being so positive and they're not sharing the reality of what's happening in their lives, that it becomes almost toxic for the consumer because all we see is how amazing everything is. And it just makes us feel like we're less than because all we see is the greatness. Um, and I think that's true in a lot of places. Um, and I don't think you see that in the Salesforce, though, Hannah. You don't just see people coming out saying like, "Oh, look how awful I am." So there's not just like, "Look how negative things are," but at the same time, you do see a lot of positive posts and a lot of positive energy. But I don't think it's necessarily fake. It's just focusing on, the positivity and the hope and how to move in a good direction. But to your point, I cannot relate to a healthcare background or coming from a healthcare background. I can sort of try to imagine, but I know that until your feet on the ground working these 40, 50, 60-hour weeks, that you just don't know what it's like. With that being said, though, yeah, there are definitely struggles in the Salesforce ecosystem. There are a lot of different types of jobs that you can get. And I see people focusing a lot on admin versus analyst versus developer versus support specialist and like looking at all these roles. But really, I think don't get yourself confused in all of that. Most companies don't even know what to call the roles, to be honest. You'll see admin used and it's obviously an analyst. You'll see analyst used and obviously it's a hybrid role where they're doing a little admin, a little analyst. And any good employee probably does a little bit of everything anyway. The only time you're going to be pigeonholed into one singular role is if you're working at a big company like a Deloitte or someone like that, and they just have so many employees and so many projects that they can literally just assign you to be only a business analyst on every project. Otherwise, if you look at your other consultancies like Coastal Cloud or Slalom or Simplus, they might have 200 or 300 people working at the company, and that's not really enough for them to be able to say you're going to be a business analyst and only a business analyst. At the end of the day, if they need an admin to come do some config work on a project and nobody's available, they're going to call on an analyst to come help out. So just be prepared to do that. But to get to your question, actually answering your question, I want you guys to focus on, especially early on in this process, focus on consulting versus working as a internal employee at a single company. That's the biggest distinction out of the gates. Consultancies operate on a different wavelength, and I'll talk about that. And internal, typically, if you work internally at a company, you're like the admin at the company. You might be on a team or something like that. But things are going to be way less crazy if you're internal at a company because it's just one company. And of course, you're going to have managers and you're going to have departments and different people are going to have different needs. But at the end of the day, if you, it's sort of the way I look at it is that you have a likelihood of there being a fire. There might be a fire that you need to put out if you work for one company. That might come up once a month, something where you need to put in a couple hours on the weekend, or maybe you thought you were going to do something on Monday and it totally gets derailed because of this issue that came up. Now, when you're working consulting, you're typically on somewhere between 3 and 5 different projects at a time. That means that any given day, you have 3 to 5 times the likelihood of one of those projects having a fire, which means you have 3 to 5 times the chance of your Monday getting derailed, or you having to put in some hours on a weekend to put those fires out. So that's the biggest distinction I would make early on is don't worry so much about the different names of different roles. Focus on consulting versus not consulting. And if you want to take it a step deeper, look at the type of consulting company you're going to work for and talk to some of the people, especially if you're in the talent stacker community. People are so transparent and you can come say like, hey, I know you work at Deloitte. Can I PM you some questions about working there? Hey, I see you work at Fast Slow Motion or Coastal Cloud, and just get a feel for like how many weeks out of the month do you think you're working more than 40 hours? And I think you'll find it's going to vary company by company. And some people are going to say, I work 50 hours every week. And you're going to talk to some people who are like, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 30, just depends on the week. And so it just in consulting, it just depends on really company culture, what they're used to seeing, and how they view the way employees should work on projects and things like that. I would say from a personality trait, and you're going to notice, I apologize, I'm super long-winded on like every question, but it's because I have so many thoughts about these topics. You're going to notice that your personality is going to tie a lot into how you work and how you balance work and life. I struggled in consulting because I couldn't put it down. And the way consulting works, and you're working from home too on top of it. So it's not like you leave the office, hop in your car, commute home, and work is done. Like you can pick up your laptop at any moment. So what I looked at was I would have a 40-hour week, and my consulting company was happy with that. But then if I was, laying in bed and thought up a solution and thought like, oh yeah, there's that one thing they needed done, I forgot about that. I know how to go fix it. Let me just open my laptop real quick and I'll get it done. And I'll tell you, anything in Salesforce takes at least 30 minutes to an hour. If you're going to go do something and then test it, and then, oh yeah, I need to add that to the layout. And oh yeah, there was that one piece I missed. Let me send an email and let them know it's done. Like every little thing just takes a little more time than you think. So there's no 10-minute anything usually. So that was my Achilles heel. And it's not, what I found is we put the most pressure on ourselves. It's typically not our employer. And I find this all the time. People coming to me saying, I'm looking for a new employer. I want to quit my job. And it's like, why? And they're like, oh, they work me so hard. And I'm like, who? Like, who is somebody pushing you and saying, hey, I noticed you didn't work enough. You need to work more. And they're like, well, no, but I've got this project. And it's like, yeah, but that's you doing that to yourself. So like, first, you need to be aware that you need to create personal barriers. And I would do that sooner than later. If you're one of those people who in this journey to becoming a Salesforce professional, you catch yourself studying on Trailhead a few hours a day, and then you say, I'm going to put it down. But then you pick it back up after the kids are in bed at 8 p.m. And then you hop on it at 5 a.m. in the morning because you're up and you were going to go to the gym, but you're on Trailhead or LinkedIn instead. Like, you're going to start noticing that personality trait of you having that, the same thing I have, which is that tendency to let, because it's fun. There's community and there's work and there's projects and there's paychecks coming in and promotions and pay raises and all this. There's so much fun to this industry that you can get sucked into it when you think, I'm just hanging out, relaxing on LinkedIn. But sometimes you just need to be a little careful, or, hey, I'm just doing a few trails because I'm working on the next cert. I would just say be aware of that. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, like you have kids and you have a full-time job and you need to squeeze the hours in where you can squeeze them in, by all means, hustle, get it done. If you're doing it just because it's what you're defaulting to when you have nothing else to do and you don't really need to put in those hours, just be thoughtful of that. And I would say that's going to be the biggest issue you're going to come into. And I expect that coming from healthcare, you guys are probably pretty hardcore and passionate about the work that you're doing. I would just be thoughtful of that, be mindful of that. When you're going into your first role, it's probably going to be mostly about the pressures you put on yourself and your own personal abilities to draw boundaries for yourself is what you're going to need to work out. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very good points. For healthcare workers, we don't have like a lot of us don't have like tech backgrounds or anything or business backgrounds at all. Is consulting a good option for someone just starting out in Salesforce?
Here's what I'll say about consulting, and I don't know if I'll try to make it specific to healthcare. Number one, I'll say Health Cloud is trending massively this year. It was last year. It picked up steam, I think, probably in the summer. I remember seeing some things about Health Cloud and I was like, what is that? How does that work? And I watched some videos about it. Really, it's just Salesforce, but it's got some, I'll call it overlays that make it more specific to healthcare and like some specific functionality for companies like hospital systems. And really where I got placed on projects throughout my career, I was always involved in healthcare, whether it was actual hospital systems or pharmaceuticals or whatever else. It wasn't like I intended to do it. It just happened. And I worked for Emory for a while on some bigger projects. I worked for some medical insurance companies. I worked for some, pharmaceutical drug companies for different things. And there's just so much money in healthcare. Number one, that they can afford a tool like Salesforce, and they prefer, you would think like, oh, you want like somebody who's just this hardcore technical person and they just know all the technical lingo and how these things work. What they really want is somebody who knows how to speak their language, because their end users are nurses and doctors and people working on the administrative side of the hospital systems. And they need somebody who can, yes, do Salesforce, but that can be taught. And so can, I guess the healthcare side can be taught too. But if you come in with an understanding of how these processes work and the lingos that you can expect from your end users, that's really your job as a Salesforce professional, is to help your end users get through a day at work and be more efficient and productive. And if you can do that, I mean, you come in on such a higher playing field when you can just talk to somebody in their standard language and convert that over to a Salesforce requirement and get it done for them. That's huge for them, not to have to get you up to speed on all that additional concept. So I think that's the biggest thing right now, is just knowing that health cloud and healthcare as an industry in the Salesforce ecosystem is huge right now. So you have a massive leg up in that area.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So with our knowledge in healthcare, would it be I guess a requirement for us to even like consider getting that health cloud specialist badge, or do you think we could land a job without having that?
I think you could probably land a job without having it. The thing I say about training for, badges and certifications and things like that, get your first certification as a baseline. That's what employers consider their ability to evaluate you well. Can you get around that first certification and land your first job? Yeah, it happens. You can do it. I think the most efficient route, and by efficient, I mean, how much time and energy are you going to put into this? I think the most efficient route is getting the certification, because basically the stats right now are 70% of Salesforce job applicants have a certification. Another 15% are working on their first certification. And then there's this other group of 15% who are trying a different route. They want to break in without having to go through that. Maybe it's they just hate tests. They're almost like scared or of going through that process and having to take a test and go through that. Or maybe they just think I should get on the job training to get that certification. I shouldn't have to put this in up front. But at the end of the day, all that matters is 70% of the applicants hitting the resume stack have a certification. So if you don't, then you are part of the bottom 30%. You got to have a major differentiator. And I think your healthcare background can be that differentiator. But if you have the certification plus a healthcare background, now you're part of the 70%, but now you're a smaller subset of it. Maybe you're top 30% now. And then as far as getting other badges, I would say if you find yourself in a position where you're certified, you feel like you're putting in a fair amount of resumes each week, you feel like you've got your LinkedIn branding on point, you're doing a good job there, getting traction and maybe posting at least 2 to 3 times a week and getting there and engaging 2 or 3 times a week and just making yourself relevant in the conversations consistently throughout the week. If you're doing those things and you feel like you're doing them well, and you have some extra time, then head back over to Trailhead and maybe get a healthcare super badge, or whatever badges they have available for the health cloud, pathway. But if you're having to force that in and you're having to sacrifice time on LinkedIn or having to sacrifice time from putting in job applications, I wouldn't let that be your priority right now. Once you get that first cert, my priority would be LinkedIn, and putting in job applications in a meaningful way. And we can talk about that, but it means doing more than clicking apply now, and trying to follow up with those companies and get in touch with them and connect with them on LinkedIn and doing a better job networking. If you're going to apply for a job, be prepared to spend at least, it doesn't have to take long. It can be 10 minutes of looking up the company, following them on LinkedIn, looking up a couple of the employees that look like they might be directors of marketing, directors of sales, people who would be involved in the Salesforce world at the company, and connecting with them and maybe sending a message and saying hi, and those kind of things. So, put in a job application, but do it in a meaningful way, and you'll improve your conversion rate as far as application to interview.
Do you think there's room in the Salesforce ecosystem for healthcare workers maybe that don't want to pursue Health Cloud? Do you think they'd still have opportunity here?
That's tough. The short answer is yes, but also what made me sort of take a step back was how can you especially if you go into consulting, how to convince a consulting company not to put you on health cloud projects, right? Because it's like, oh, look, I just found out that Ashley has a healthcare background. And she never brought that up because it wasn't a focus for her. But hey, this is pretty cool. And maybe we should put her on that health cloud project. If you get an independent role, because and the reason for that is it's so in demand. It's just so in demand. You're going to have healthcare related projects, and your background is going to make you more beneficial for those roles. And it's going to be easier for your manager to say, hey, put them on a healthcare related project. They'll fit in better over there. That'll be their people. As far as that goes, is there room to do work and it not be related to healthcare? Absolutely. I mean, we see, you guys have probably seen some of the stories like mail carriers and truck drivers and kids that are in high school and college and stuff like that have no industry experience in anything. There's room for them. So there's certainly room for you as an experienced professional. But are you going to be able to avoid healthcare with it trending like this? If you go to a consultancy, you're probably going to get roped into some health related projects, if I had to guess.
I have a question here from Deneen. She's asking, do we drop our hard-earned post-nominal letters if they're not directly related to Salesforce? So like certifications and things, would you recommend we keep those?
So that's a good question. No, I don't think you drop those because I think a smart company. A while back, I was interested in like how people get into colleges like Harvard, and how do you do that? And so there's this trend with the process that those colleges go through to decide if they're going to allow people into, especially some of their graduate programs and things like that. And what they're looking for is your ability to have excellence. And there's this theory that if you can be excellent at one thing, then you have the ability to be excellent. It doesn't mean you can only be an excellent healthcare professional. It means you have the potential to be excellent at anything you put your mind to. So I would say those credentials and whatever accolades you've accomplished in your current industry serve as showing your potential to be excellent at something else. So if your company needs you to come in and be an all-star employee and be an amazing Salesforce professional, I think that should be your talk track too. If you're interviewing or you're talking to people and they're like, what are these other things? And, you can say like, these are very well-respected accolades in my previous industry. And, the thing about me is that I work really hard at whatever I do, and I take my job very seriously, and I'm passionate about the work that I do. So I think you'll find that I will also excel in Salesforce, and that for your company, I'm also going to be excellent because I have a track record of proving that I can get some of those accolades in other places, and I can certainly get those accolades here.
I have a question from Gianna. She's asking how do you do well presenting yourself confidently in an interview if you're new to the system or you might like be introverted? How do you come off more confident with having so little experience with Salesforce?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, a couple of different things there, like being new to the ecosystem brings its own level of imposter syndrome. And if you follow me at all, you'll hear me talk about being an imposter a lot. I think we're always imposters. I feel like an imposter half the time. Like I had some meetings with Salesforce last week, and it's all about who you're talking to and interacting with when you feel like an imposter, right? Like if I talk to somebody who's accomplished far more than I have, and they're way ahead of me from, the success standpoint, then I feel like an imposter and like I don't belong in the room, right? And that goes for anyone. Anytime you're in your element, you feel comfortable. And anytime you're out of your element, you feel like you don't belong in the conversation. And I think we have to get past that, because the first thing I want like entry-level Salesforce people to know is that, I mean, you've seen it, Salesforce knows it. And they openly say this. They have entire departments dedicated to the fact that one of the biggest issues that Salesforce has is the fact that they have so many customers and so little Salesforce talent in the ecosystem. So for any of you that are going, I don't know a lot about Salesforce. Like, I got some super badges, but I don't feel like an expert. I got my certification, but I don't feel like I could do the job. What you have to keep in mind is you are the best qualified option for these companies. There is no better option. They either get your help or they get no help. And you have to be willing to come in and help them where they are. It's just like, this is my awful attempt at a healthcare related example, but it's like, if I'm, choking in the middle of the airport and I need help and there's not a doctor around, by God, I'll settle for the next best thing. Does anybody know anything about this? Please help me. And I will settle for that. And I think it's the same thing in Salesforce. It's like these companies are out there and they're like, look, I have a job opening and I want somebody with 3 to 5 years experience. And then they look up a month later and they haven't filled the role and they're paying $100,000 a year for Salesforce licenses. And somebody at that company gave the thumbs up to buy Salesforce and invest in this. And now they wanted to be the hero. Now they're looking like a problem. They need somebody to be hired and come in and help them be the hero again. And that's what you represent. They want somebody with 5 years experience, but guess what? They're happily employed at a company and they're probably making $150,000 to $250,000. And then they look and they go, where can I save money? Where can I fit this into the budget that I told everyone we could do it with? And all of a sudden, it's somebody with very little experience, maybe no experience, maybe somebody who shows a lot of promise and an ability to be excellent. And they're very engaged in the community. And all these things start to look really good because you can get it for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 instead of $120,000, $140,000, $160,000. And all of a sudden they're saying, please just help us. The doctor wasn't in the room right now. I need someone who is the best qualified person in the room. Please come help me. And that's what's happening. So don't let yourself feel like an imposter. Go in knowing that you are the best qualified option that these people have, and you will be, and you have the potential to be incredible for their company. And you know that you've done certifications on your own. You've done your personal branding on your own. You've done these super badges. You've got involved in communities. You're showing up to events like this on your own. You are the best qualified person to do the job for them because you are this type of person. So just keep that in mind. As far as being an introvert goes, one time I was on a panel and somebody asked the question, raise your hand if you are an extrovert. And I raised my hand and no one else did. And I was blown away. I thought everyone on that call was an extrovert. I was like, there's no way. We're all sitting here on a panel discussing something openly. And I think what I learned is that introverts are not against conversation. They're not against talking. They're not against socializing. They just prefer to talk about things that they find interesting, that they want to talk about, the stories they want to share. And I think to that, I would say, if you're going to interview, try to be prepared with stories. So many people make the mistake of going and Googling, I got an interview. Okay, so let me look up what are the top 20 interview questions for Salesforce jobs. And then they study interview questions, but people don't want to hire a robot, right? They don't want to hire someone who goes, hey, can you tell me about a weakness that you have? And you're like, my weakness. And you just say something that's scripted off the internet. Or they ask you, tell me about the security settings in Salesforce. And you just script something right off a trailhead. What they want is somebody who can answer that question. And I think this is going to be, I think it's the most meaningful thing I've learned about interviews is having stories prepared. So I did this little, sort of like this trial with Justin Ducks, and some of you may know him or you may not, but he's a really amazing interview, sort of a Salesforce interview expert. And what we found was that if you look at the top 10 interview questions that you'll find commonly asked in Salesforce interview questions, one good story can answer about 7 to 8 of those questions. So what that means is, if you come prepared and you just have 10 questions and 10 answers, and that's what you're ready for, that will help you some degree. Hopefully they ask one of those questions. But if you come prepared with maybe 2 to 3 stories that cover different things for you, and I can sort of tell you about that, you could be asked any number of questions. You could be asked, tell me about yourself. You could be asked, tell me something you're really good at. Tell me a moment you're proud of. And if you can tell a story and you can say, I was in a study group to get my first Salesforce certification. And this is a challenge that we were dealing with a group. Maybe it's half the group dropped out. Maybe it's people weren't showing up. Maybe somebody ended up being a little like overwhelming to the group. And as a group, you had to figure out how to work around that and still find success. And you can take something as simple as being in a study group together and come up with a situation. You say, you know, but this is how we solved it. And this is how we overcame that. Especially if you can get together with a group. If you're in Talent Stacker, you'll get involved. We guarantee you volunteer projects with teams. But if you're not in Talent Stacker, you can still get with other people in the community and sort of drum up even like personal projects. I recommend working personal projects as a team because it's going to make you deal with some of the BS, like getting people together, getting people to actually attend, having to divvy up responsibilities. And as much as that feels like a pain, it's like, why would I want to pain myself with all of that, Brad? It's like, because that's what makes you grow. That's because that's what creates stories and that's what gives you compelling stuff to tell. And I can tell you, if you can walk into an interview and you can talk about us and you can talk about we as a group, as a team, that is so much more dynamic than I did this, I did this, I did this. It just shows more texture and depth to the experience and preparation that you have. And you'll find if you ever find yourself struggling, anytime, if it's a personal project, if it's a study group, if it's a certification, if it's a super badge, don't ignore the struggle. I would actually take notes on the struggle because that might be one of your favorite stories to tell in interviews.
As far as interviewing goes, like a lot of us in healthcare, we are still working our full-time jobs and our schedules are really like crazy busy, extensive. Like, do you have any tips on how to tackle the interview process while still working full-time?
Yeah, that's tough. And I'll take a moment to say that I'm actually working with, this is one of the talk tracks I have with consultancies that I talk to about, you know, the biggest struggle for consultancies and any company right now in the Salesforce space is what we, you know, awfully refer to as the talent war. Because it is a talent war. The hardest thing for a consultancy to do is find a qualified employee. The second hardest thing for them to do is keep that person for more than 6 to 12 months. They are gone and out the door for a higher offer. And while it's really awesome for us, right? Like we get to pick and choose our offers, especially once we have 3 to 6 months experience, the doors fly wide open. For consultancies and employers, it's awful. It is a major problem because to hire someone at $70,000, it costs them about $30,000 to $40,000 to go through that process. So if you quit after 6 months, they had to pay your wages, get you ramped up, spend the 30 to 40K, and then hire someone again for 30 to 40K. So it is in their best interest to find quality talent quickly and then keep that talent if at all possible. So I will get to your question. By the way, what does this mean to you? So I've been talking to them about being more flexible. We've made not a lot of headway. Employers aren't quite, they still haven't adjusted to the current employer-employee model, which is sort of the modern model, is that employees have much more power than they have over the last 10, 20, 50 years. And employers are finally in a position where their back's against the wall and they have to treat this as more of a partnership and less of a gift to you for giving you a job offer. It's not a gift anymore. It's just as much a gift from you, the employee, to say yes to an offer as it is a gift from them to say, well, you can work for me. So we're finding this balance. And so what I'm recommending to them is to schedule interviews after 5 o'clock, really between the hours of maybe 5 to 9 p.m., and giving the people at the company who are willing to work overtime to do those interviews, giving them major bonuses, giving them additional PTO days for the hours that they work outside of that 8-hour day. Because what it does, the problem with the interview process right now is the typical interview process, 3 to 5 interviews. Now that's an even bigger problem for what you're mentioning. Not only do you have to figure out how to find an hour one time, you have to figure out how to find an hour 3 to 5 times for every single company that is taking you seriously. And that creates a problem for you, but really just as big of a problem is for that employer, because some of these companies that have 4 interviews and it takes them 4 weeks to get you through those 4 interviews, another company can come in with a streamlined interview process where they're willing to sit with you from 5 to 8 p.m. and talk to you in those hours. And that's more available to you and they're available too. And they can have 3 interviews in a week and give you an offer. which means top talent will get picked up by the companies with the fastest interview process who can give them an offer quickly. And the companies that are going to struggle are the ones that take a month to get you through the interview process. So I just want to point that out because it's something I'm focused on right now. It's like one of my side projects is to help educate companies about how to improve their interview processes to give you guys a better experience and to help them get top talent faster. Now, as far as your schedule goes, honestly, I don't know if there's a good answer for that because, companies are typically working their employees from 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 or whatever it is. And they're unwilling to ask people to, sign up for interviews after hours. And then you guys are working because the thing about skilled roles, when you're hiring for skilled roles, this isn't just unemployed people who don't have a job. Like the best talent already has a job and they're just looking to level it up or to transition into something that meets their life values a little bit more cleanly. So I hate to say it, but for that one, I don't know that I have a good answer other than the stuff you guys already know, like trying to schedule interviews in your lunch break, or if you interview with companies that are in a different time zone, because Salesforce is a remote world, you could potentially apply for companies in other time zones. That way, like for me, I'm on the Pacific coast right now, so I could potentially apply for jobs on, East Central Mountain and have different interview hours or available hours before or after I work kind of thing. So, I mean, there's some things you can toss in there that might help a little bit, but I don't think there's a silver bullet to how to not tip off your employer or, miss out on actually taking care of people who need taken care of while you're out trying to find your next job. So bottom line, it's a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to tackle that one myself. Like I'm still trying to get certified, but that's been like one of my biggest concerns is, how am I supposed to do this? All my friends are doing these like 5-stage interviews and it's a real problem.
Communicate with others and maybe there's a little room to be clear with employers and just say, hey, do you mind? Like, I think especially coming from healthcare, if you put a little something behind it, to a little guilt pull, this is what I do every day. And this is what, these people need me, I'm here for a reason.
Lives.
I'm just out here saving lives. If there's any way you could meet with me at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., I'm happy to be overtime for you if you're happy to be overtime for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have a question here from Amin. She's saying, is working as a health cloud independent consultant not present within the US? Have you heard of independent consultancies with the health cloud?
So I think the cool thing about independent consulting, which basically means a one-person shop, is that you can independent consult in anything you want. It's up to you. I mean, really the best advice I have for independent consultants is to find a niche. And so if you can specialize in health cloud, and I think any of you guys could, then I think that's a great route to go. My typical advice is try to get a year of full-time experience under your belt first, maybe 2 to 3 certifications and a year of experience. This is as much to help you get a better foundational knowledge of how this really works in the real world. And it's going to help you better serve clients. But I would say put in that first year, see if independent consulting still feels like something you want to do, and then take that experience. And yeah, I think you could absolutely market yourself as a independent consultant specializing in the health cloud ecosystem. And I think just like anywhere else in the Salesforce world, I think you'll find pretty much endless work.
A lot of us in the healthcare field we've worked with like nonprofit businesses and kind of still have that desire to work with a nonprofit. Is there any setbacks in the Salesforce ecosystem working with nonprofits, or how does that compare?
So I don't think there's a setback. I think there's probably more potential than anything. If you're going to work a full-time job at a nonprofit, I would say just because of I don't know what to call it, just norms with nonprofits expect to get paid some percentage less. They just expect that if you're the best way to get hired at a nonprofit is to show passion for their mission, right? Whatever their mission is, you need to be able to show passion for that mission. But if you're truly passionate about their mission, then it would also go to say that you would probably be willing to accept below market pay rates to be involved in that mission. So I would say expect that in the nonprofit world. Now I'll mention, so if you were thinking maybe I'm worth 80,000, then in the nonprofit world, maybe expect 75% of that, maybe 60,000, something like that. But still expect that if you have 2 to 3 years experience in the for-profit arena, you're probably expecting 120, 130K. So in the nonprofit arena, I would still be expecting, to get paid about $100,000, even, at a nonprofit where you're focused on their goals. If you have a real Salesforce experience under your belt. I'm trying to think. The other thing is, one of the consultancies I worked with, like their best kept secret was that working for nonprofits was the most profitable companies to work for. And that's because the nonprofits, they get their first 10 Salesforce licenses for free. So those come free of charge for a really nice addition. So they actually save money on the licensing side of Salesforce, which means they might have more budget for the professional services, the employment side of Salesforce. So there is a little wiggle room, especially as I'm sure many of you know, nonprofits does not mean that they struggle to make money or that they don't have revenue streams. It simply means that they're a nonprofit. I mean, I know plenty of nonprofits that make extreme amounts of money and they're still nonprofits and they can accept volunteers and they can ask people to work for less money because they're involved in that mission. But it's not like they make any less than the for-profit corporations that are just not, taxed the same way.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question from Amin. She's asking, with the healthcare health cloud consulting, is it possible to work remotely, or do you have to be physically present for that kind of work in the US?
I would say in the Salesforce ecosystem, there is no necessity to be on site for anything. When I first started consulting like 9-10 years ago, they would expect us to come in for basically what we did was we expected to come on site for the first meeting to introduce ourselves and understand the requirements fully. And then we were expected to come on site for the last meeting, which was end user training and training the administrators on how to use everything. But now, and really in the last 5 years, I see consultancies and really most internal jobs too are all fully remote. Independent consulting, yeah, I don't think you're ever going to be asked to come in because the thing is, it's not like you just book the tickets and hotel and you come in. The expectation is, say that I'm flying from, whatever, North Florida to South Florida even, and it's a 1-hour flight, but from door to door, it's probably 4 hours between me leaving my house and commuting and waiting and getting there early and getting off the plane and getting to the hotel. And they get charged for those hours because those are your hours. So they get charged for 4 hours of consulting, plus the plane, plus the hotel, plus you expense your food while you're on the trip. So when you start talking to companies and they're like, hey, can you come in for a meeting? And it's like, I can, if that's meaningful to you, I absolutely can come in. But for a quick plane ride, a hotel, my food for a couple of days and my time, you're probably looking at over $1,000. Are you sure you want me to come in? I can, but you're going to pay for it. And usually they're like, you know what, let's do a Zoom call. That'll be good.
Is there usually like some sort of like contracting that comes out of that? Like as an independent, like, are you like drafting an agreement between your clients at that point, or?
Always. Yeah, always. It's the real deal. Independent consulting is not like Fiverr or hopping on Craigslist and saying, yeah, I'll come over and, I can help you out with that real quick. It's, it has to be professional, non-disclosure agreements, statements of work, proposals, contracts, payment terms, design documents, training decks, all that stuff. It's got to be the real deal. Otherwise you're not worth what you're supposed to be worth. Like you got to come at it full force. It builds your brand. It helps their company. What people don't realize is that in the world we live in, data is the most expensive asset that companies have. A lot of people think, whoa, look at all the cars that company has, or look at the office space that company has. Those are not the assets anymore. The data in Salesforce, the data in the database is the most expensive asset. If you took all of their customers, and all of their potential customers. Imagine working in healthcare. Imagine if you came in tomorrow and all of the customer health records were completely botched. Everybody's names were misarranged, phone numbers were wrong, the addresses were wrong. This person doesn't actually have the needs that they're supposed to have because their health history record is aligned with the wrong person. That's data. And if you let somebody go rogue in your Salesforce instance and they do some major data updates and move that data, and it can happen. You can do that in a heartbeat. I could take health data records, export them from your system, mess up a formula in Excel, and then re-import those into your system, and you would have awful data. And so, and on top of it too, think non-disclosures. I'm not allowed, I have access as the Salesforce professional to all of that health history and all of that, compliant data that's in your system. And I could go share that if you don't have a non-disclosure with me. I would not be legally obligated not to share that without the right documentation in place. So yeah, people's data is very serious, and you'll find that you've got to have the right contracts in place to kick those projects off.
Very good. Thank you. I'd just like to take a minute, take a quick photo before we close up our session. So if anyone wants to be in the photo, they can show their picture and we'll give a countdown and take a picture.
Okay, I'm gonna take that snapshot now. Right, smile. All right.
Alrighty. Does anyone else have any last minute questions that they'd like to ask Bradley before we close out? You can unmute yourself if you'd like.
Another shot. I think I did it prematurely.
Oh, okay. We'll do one more.
Sorry. Let's. All right. Smile, everyone. There. Very good.
All right. Awesome. I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. It can be Salesforce or what I had for breakfast or whatever else. Full transparency, I forgot to eat breakfast, so that's not a good question, so don't ask that. But yeah, anything you got, I'm happy to answer.
Well, I'm just curious because I listened to the Choose FI podcast. So how has Salesforce shaped your FI journey? How is that? Do you have any advice for us looking to reach financial independence?
Yeah, I think the whole FI thing has always been, save more, spend less. And I think for me, Salesforce changed that formula to save more, spend less, make more. And so it just made that journey so much easier. And even with talking with people like, Jonathan from Choose FI and Paula Pant from Afford Anything and Nick Loper over at Side Hustle Nation, like some of these leaders, they all realize that for the longest time, they've done a bit of a disservice in just telling people how to, spend less and save more and invest the rest. And they forgot that there might be this other option to what if you made more and then you could spend the same and still save more. It's this amazing thing that happens. So Salesforce has totally shifted my view on retirement and everything in between, because really once you get your first 1 or 2, maybe 3 years under your belt, you move from worrying. To me, this is what happened to me. I went from worrying about, well, how can I get to a 6-figure income? And then it happened so quickly. And it's like the best problem to have, right? It's like, oh, wow, okay, I've got a 6-figure income. So what's next? And then it's like, well, what about lifestyle? Like maybe because FI, like the core concepts of financial independence teach you that it's not about material objects necessarily. And it's not about buying everything you can possibly get your hands on. So all of a sudden, when your income goes up so rapidly, like with a Salesforce career, you end up having all of this disposable income. And yes, you can continue to invest it if you like, or whatever else you want to do. But what it creates is this gap where you can go, well, maybe when my next pay raise comes in, I won't say I want a $10,000 raise. Maybe I'll say, I don't want to work on Fridays. Maybe I'll say I want every Friday to be a half day. So like quick story, you know how my quick stories go. And if you don't, you're going to find out my quick stories are not quick, but anyway. So story I'll say is that I worked for a company and And when I started there, I was part-time. This was part of my push for lifestyle flexibility. So I left my day job making 100K plus, and I took a part-time job making $60,000 working from 8 to 12. And my first year, I worked for them for 4 years. In the first year, they said, okay, Brad, we're going to talk about your pay raise. And I said, okay, cool. I would like to not have a pay raise. What I would like to do is, instead of working 8 to 12, I'd like to work 8 to 11. And then I showed them how I could still get the job done. And they said, okay, let's trial it. Let's see how it works, and we'll take it from there. So we ended up agreeing to do 8:30 to 11:30 because it served the business more directly. So that helped them. My next year, when it came around, they said, okay, Brad, time for your pay raise. And I told them I was going to be taking an RV trip. So I was already fully remote, but I said, I need you guys to be flexible with me. I may not have internet sometimes. I may get into some situations where I was going to work 8:30 to 11:30, but now I need to work in the afternoon so I can get to a coffee shop and connect to Wi-Fi. There may be some situations like that. And they said, let's see how it goes. And we hit the road, and it worked out fine. And we traveled for a year. And I think that's when you get into this state of rethinking financial independence and realizing, with a career in Salesforce, the whole goal in financial independence is to retire because we're unhappy with work. Typically, it's like, work is not something that I value so much that I want to do it 40 hours a week. Well, what if you could design a life where you did something fully remote, where you worked 15 or 20 hours a week, and it ended up being a passion hobby that keeps you productive and feeling meaningful to something bigger than your life. And you were also able to make incredible income doing that. And I think that's the freedom that Salesforce brings. The longer you're in here, as long as you keep thinking about, how can I leverage my skills to create a life that I actually enjoy, Salesforce can do that for you. And that's what it did for my FI journey, for sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having it just even as a skill set. Like once I reach FI, I could work kind of like what you did, work part-time consulting or something just to keep me busy. And not have to work full time if I don't want to.
When I started working part-time, it felt really good, having like noon until 11 p.m. every day to like do your own thing. And it started feeling like work was part of what you did each day and not your day every day. So yeah.
Anyone else have any questions?
I actually do have one question. Hi, I'm Carla. It's actually, I was actually going to say, do you think working remotely make it harder to learn faster rather than going to the office, since you're kind of missing the interaction with your coworker, since everything now is remotely, and I never work remotely, so.
Yeah, I think it can be. I think it's up to you to a degree, right? I think that working from home, you have to be more active and more diligent about getting the experience that you want to get out of it, because you can take a back seat. You can, when there's no work to do and the emails aren't flowing in, you can just go watch Netflix or, go do the dishes and laundry or whatever you want to do. And there are days of the week you might do that anyway. But you also need to make sure that's not every day of the week. And when you have downtime, you're maybe reaching out to a coworker and saying like, hey, we should do a lunch and learn. And the cool thing is about Salesforce is you don't have to learn at work. You can learn from the community. You can learn from Trailhead. You can go to meetups like this on specific topics. If your company isn't interested in developing you as an employee, you can develop yourself. And I think that's what I would say about working from home is you can develop yourself. You're not tied to what happens in the four walls of the office anymore. You have the entire ecosystem to learn from. And that's an incredible thing. You can go to extremely meaningful meetups specific to healthcare, or you can go to meetups specific to learning about flows today. And maybe your company, just wasn't, maybe they're busy, maybe they're in meetings today, maybe there's some initiative that they're on and they don't have time to, work with you on something. And the cool thing is you get to continue to grow yourself, even if that's not their primary focus, it can be yours. So I think being involved in this virtual world, it goes back to the question, maybe it was the second or third question of this conversation was, around how to sort of, grow yourself and how to make sure you're on a path where you're continually learning and doing the things. So the thing was, if you're going to work for a consultancy, what are some of the hiccups you can walk into? What are some of the biggest problems I might face? What should I be aware of? And I would say it's a similar conversation. It's about you creating your own schedule and your own barriers, and your own structure to how you want to grow and learn as a professional, and then sticking to that and getting into a rhythm of that. The same thing, it's like consulting. If you want to be done at 5 o'clock every day, then you need to be done at 5 o'clock every day and set that example. Otherwise, if you start replying to emails at 7 o'clock every night, they're going to get used to you replying to emails every night at 7 o'clock. And that's your own fault for replying to emails at 7 o'clock. Unless someone harassed you and said, like, you got to be available in these situations, then you're putting that pressure on yourself, and that's your fault for replying at 7 o'clock. The same thing goes for if you're at work and you feel like you're not learning as much as you should be learning, and you're not, growing as fast as you should be growing, but then you catch yourself folding laundry and doing dishes and watching Netflix because you don't have any meetings for the next half hour. That's on you too. You got to, be prepared with something structured to, all right, the meeting's over. I don't have anything to do for the next hour. I know what I'm doing for the next hour. I'm watching that video that I meant to watch. I'm hopping on Trailhead to do that badge I meant to do. I'm going to watch the replay of that awesome session that Lori put on with that Brad guy. Like, that's what you can do with that downtime.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else?
Just a quick question. Hi, everyone. Rudolph here. And I would just like to ask Bradley, every time I'm studying, I'm wondering, like, I know that this might be not there's not a specific answer for this question, but is there like a specific task or activity that one might hop into when you get to your first Salesforce job? Like something like, because I'm always asking myself, like, what would be like the first thing you get to do when you get hired as a Salesforce admin?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends on the company. I've got this idea of, like, when you land your first job, you're going to feel like an imposter no matter what. That's just the way it is. If I got a new job today, I would have those insecurities and kind of be like, oh man, like, I hope they like me. So I think the first thing I would do if I was starting a new job is I would talk to my coworkers and the first level of management, like whoever's in charge of the work that I do and what my priorities are. And I would ask to schedule a meeting with all of them. And your coworkers are going to be like, what? Like, we just kind of work together. We don't need to have like a one-on-one. But the first thing I would do is get involved and get engaged with them, because everybody's got an angle. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got their own personalities and unique things. And like Carla said, talking about this remote world, you've got to get involved. You've got to be part of the community. So I would say, get together with them, talk to them about what's the story with Salesforce. Does the company love it? Are there some departments that kind of hate Salesforce at the company because they haven't gotten the results they were hoping to have? Maybe sales loves it, but marketing hates it, and support's okay with it, but they just got a new manager and they're not really up to speed on it. So there's kind of this love-hate relationship at the moment. Just getting yourself inside those internal conversations and making yourself part of that little community that's inside the company, I think is the biggest part. Again, it goes back to, it's really not about Salesforce. It's about, they could, just get some senior level Salesforce Premier support plan and just send tickets to Salesforce, but they hired you because they want to work with you. And they're with you 40 hours a week. So just keep in mind that even in a virtual world, we're all real people, and we all have our own personalities, and we all like a little bit of, drama, or to talk about something that's not quite work related. And you want to be part of that, because that's what makes work relationships what they are, is, getting involved in more than just what are my tasks for today. If you want to be a hero, I would say you got to be careful with this one, but review the org, try to figure out what you've learned in your studies up to this point. And then if you see anything that looks out of place, maybe bring it back to the community and get some validation on those things that look out of place, and maybe develop some expert opinions on how you could change those or how you could modify things to be better. But at the same time, what you want to avoid on your first, week, month on the job is jumping in and acting like you know everything and saying like, hey, we need to change this and that's not right. I read in the review notes that this isn't best practice. And it's like, yeah, cool. Welcome to the team. So you're that guy. So just be careful about trying to show value in a way that could potentially step on somebody's toes who's been there for a long time. You never know who you might offend. Like, this process is really screwed up, and you're talking to the person who designed the process. So just be thoughtful of that when you're finding maybe some inconsistencies in the orgs that you jump into.
Yeah, thanks.
For sure.
How do you actually start a chat over coffee?
How do you start a chat over coffee?
With
I
your
think,
coworkers?
oh, with your coworkers. Yeah.
Like, are you all online already to start with, or what?
No, it might be an email. It might be, a lot of companies use like Slack or some kind of chat tool where you can see the little green dot and they're active today at work, and you can be like, hey, how's it going? I saw your calendar. You know, it looks like we both got some free time. I don't know what you do for lunch. But hey, would it be cool if we talk and just say like 15 minutes? And then if the conversation's super dry and you're like, why did I plan this call? Then you're only on the hook for 15 minutes and then you can jump. But if it's awesome and you're having a great time, then everybody's going to be happy to go over and spend their lunch hanging out, talking. And who knows, you might bring new culture to the community at the company, where all of a sudden everybody's doing lunch hangouts, as much as they can to get together. And I think that's what it's about. Like, if you don't like the community you're in, then do something about bringing that community to what you're looking at. Like, I remember in my neighborhood that I lived in Florida, it wasn't a very communal neighborhood. And I remember talking to a friend like, man, there's no community here. And he's like, you should do something about that. Like, instead of complaining about it, you should like do something. And so we just invited all the neighbors to like a neighborhood get together. And sure, like the first time only like 4 or 5 neighbors came, and then all of a sudden the whole neighborhood's hanging out. And it all starts with somebody taking that first step and trying to bridge that. So as far as a coffee chat goes, just try to schedule 15 minutes. Tell them, as you know, I'm new to the team, and I would just love the chance to, get to know you and tell you a little bit about myself for a second. And you can just kick it off, easy icebreaker. How did you get started with the company? How long have you been here? Like, how did you get started with Salesforce? What are your plans? Like, where, what school did you go to? Did you go to school? Like, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's so many little conversations to be had to get to know people a little bit better. And in 15 minutes, you can have a really tough conversation where it doesn't go well, or you might find yourself on a call for an hour, like, oh my gosh, I got to get back to work. Talk to you later. So it's a great way to just break the ice and give people a chance to get to know you, and you can do the same.
Awesome.
And I would say before you land your first job too, by the way, like those little coffee chats, like 15-minute coffee chats, you could pretty much reach out to anybody and say, hey, I've got some down. I'm willing to be flexible for you. If there's somebody you want to get to know, if they work at a company you really want to work for, just tell them that you really respect where they are in their career, and you aspire to be there one day. Show them a little respect. Ask them if they'd be willing to sit down for just 10, 15 minutes and chat about, Salesforce opportunities. And they're hiring, and you go hang out with them for a little bit and get to know them. And you never know where those conversations can go. Worst case scenario, you meet somebody, build a relationship, and going from there. It's not, there's not a lot of loss in that.
All right. I think,
awesome.
Are we okay to wrap this up now?
I think so. Thank you so much, Brad, for coming and talking to all of us. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and listening to our chat.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you inviting me to come hang out. And if anybody wants to chat, I'm always on LinkedIn. So just come find me on LinkedIn. I promise I'll be there.
All right. Everybody have a good day.
You too.
Bye. Good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.